required in the interest of safety, but adults please ensure small children are covered. The whole of the boat is non-smoking.
There we are.
What do you think?
Cups for what?
Feed the duck.
No,
That
this one.
No.
Oh,
Cheaper one coat to can.
Okay then everyone, so we're now safely out onto the river. Yeah, getting pretty wild out here now, so a lot of windage on where it meets the sea, an estuary called Braden Water, and it also connects up to 6 other rivers and 63 lakes to form the wonderful Norfolk Broads National Park, a really special area for wildlife which we'll be on the lookout for, and we're going to talk a bit about some of the history as well. And over on the right we've not only got the Barton House Miniature Railway, but a wonderful charity called the Wherry Yacht Charter Trust. And if you look through the hole in the hedge there, you can see a lovely black hulled boat called the Hathor. That is one of our wherries, one of our very old wherries. You can also see underneath the green tarpaulin there's some white hulled boats. So the black one, that's what we call a pleasure wherry, and the white hulled ones are known as wherry yachts. Now the story of the wherries is these very shallow bottom boats with huge single in the village with its own private broad in its garden. And as you can see though, where the lawn is, it's got absolutely turned into a bit of a mud bath, unfortunately. There's quite a lot of grey lag geese there though. They're the most common geese on the Broads. This place on the left, this little blue and white holiday bungalow, this is called Leisure Hour, one of the original 1920s holiday bungalows, so gives you some idea as to what the houses might have looked like sort of back in the day. But again, even that one is still flooded. You can see behind the house there's a lot of water there. Now from one of the sort of ago, they knocked down an old sort of 1970s house and replaced it with this very stylish number, which I think they've done a very nice job with, as well as the annex next door, which they use as a holiday rental. Lay it up on the slope of the roof. That's a really good waterproofing and insulating material that can last a lifetime, but it's not very flexible, so you can't bend it around the top of the roof. So we need another material up there, and for that we use saw sage, which is a more soft grass-like plant, and it all gets tucked, it all gets tied in with a lovely little lattice work of hazelwood stakes, and each of those has a particular pattern, which is a bit like the signature of the thatcher that did the work. Now over on the right hand side now, we have got the former holiday home of the great entertainer George Formby, who used to play the ukulele, do lots of funny songs, and was a black and white movie star. And the house today is called Heronby, but when George Formby had it, he named it Berrildene, after his fearsome wife and manager Beryl. And they also had a couple of boats they kept down the dyke there, named the Lady Beryl 1 and 2. So as we head downstream as well, we're going to be looking out for lots of wildlife as well. We really are a great place for wildlife in Norfolk Broads. We've got a quarter of all of Britain's rarest species living here. In the last couple of weeks I've seen otters, kingfishers, red kites, marsh harriers, and elsewhere in the national park I've seen bitterns and cranes and spoonbills, so there's lots of interesting things to look out for, so we'll keep a good eye. Mel's pretty good at sniffing out a kingfisher in particular. Much of a problem. Just coming up to the last house in the village now. It's one of my favourites. You can see it's been built almost like a sort of bridge over the top of the dyke there, running between the river here and Worxham Boat behind. So really unusual property, that one. And it was always meant to be unique. It was built by a vicar for his family just after the First World War, sadly in memory of his son who was killed in the war, and they wanted a special way to remember him. Here we've got the older car woodland, which is pretty much the closest thing to rainforest that you're going to get in this country. And dry deciduous trees, things like oak and ash, are not going to grow here very well. So we're mainly getting older, although there's a bit of willow and a bit of birch there as well. But the alders, about 70% of the trees that you see here with the little nutty bits on the end. And it's a very poles at one stage. Now one thing even older trees can't resist, or any other tree, is bank erosion undercutting them. And you can see that these banks here, particularly on the right but also a bit on the left, have been massively undercut, and the trees are beginning to fall into the river, and then they have to be cut back. And what's causing that is speeding boats. If the boats are just 4 miles an hour, and that's all policed by the Broads Authority, National Park Authority, who have rangers out and about making sure everyone's behaving themselves. So it's looking pretty wild on Worxham Boat, so I'm just going to have to assess whether we can cross the Broad now. So I'm going to have a look, but it's looking, and we may have to stay on the other side of the island, but we'll have a look. No, so it's looking pretty dangerous out on the Broad, so we're going to stay in the shelter of this island. I might pop in the other end, which is more sheltered, but this top end's looking pretty dangerous to go on. So you can see the waves that are whipping up on that. It's really howling through this entrance here. This day boat's going to be lucky if it doesn't get blown into the side. Okay, so those of you, probably especially if you're in the top, you're going to be able to see Wroxham Broad across to the right hand side. Now, the amazing thing is, if you look at that big old open section of water, you'd think it was always going to have been there, right? And that's what people assumed for a long time, until 1960, when a female scientist called Dr. Joyce Lambert actually discovered that all the Broads are actually created by medieval peat diggings and not natural after all. So what we now know happened is that the Vikings came over to this part of the world more than 1,000 years ago, and at that time we had one of the biggest populations in England due to our thriving wool and the spinning trade. And all of these people needed a lot of fuel, but the only fuel they had about was wood. They chopped a lot of the trees down, so we're a little bit stuck really. But the Vikings gave us a solution to that problem, because they taught us about peat digging. Now, peat is this sort of plant matter that gets compressed and preserved in lots of boggy areas, and you dig out little blocks called turbs, dry it and burn it as a fuel for heating and cooking. And over hundreds of years, vast amounts of this peat were dug out by nothing more than medieval man with a spade. But about 500 years ago that all changed. That's because medieval times were much colder than they are right now, and as the temperatures warm more towards how they are today.
Here's your money.
Yeah.
But if you want something else, I have more money.
Okay, you sure?
Yeah, sure.
Thank you.
As we head down to this section, it's pretty good for wildlife.
Sure.
It's particularly good for kingfishers. So if you hear, especially on this S-bend, we've seen a lot. So if you hear like a high-pitched whistle, that's the call of a kingfisher. And they only make that noise when they're in flight. And they fly about sort of 30 miles an hour, very fast and low with the feathers. Occasionally we see otters around here as well, so keep your eyes peeled for them. I saw one last week, a female otter crossing the river. We've got heron just flying ahead of us now.
You see?
Yeah.
Huh? Oh no. You have to be the car.
Oh no.
Got a buzzard just flying over in front of us. Did anyone see this? It should just be circling over
Like
a small broad called the Pulp, which I'll point out in a moment. The trouble is, in this woodland, when they drop down low, you can't see them, but it rose up, went across the river here, then down again. Life here on the Broads can get disturbed by the sort of heavy boat traffic you get along the river here in the summer months, but by having all these wild areas either side of us, that gives some of our shyer species a bit of a home when the tourism industry is going full strength. but of course these days, with it being shut off to boats, the bank has sort of completely reclaimed the water through a process called succession, where the reed and the sedge grow further and further into the water, and then their leaf matter drops, and it mounts up and it creates like a floating raft called a hover, and then out of that hover grows all of this carr woodland, which then dries out the land with their roots and shades out the light. Before you know it, the reed and sedge dies off, and you've just got this this sort of wild carr woodland. Now over on the right as well, you can see we've got Salhouse Little Broad. This is a small privately owned broad owned by some very rich landowners called the Caters, and they own vast swathes of land around here, including Salhouse Big Broad, that we're going to check out shortly, and the entire next village of Wisbech. Now Wisbech is actually famous. He's just come out again this year, so he's going pretty well. He looks a bit blowy for him. He usually, when the weather turns, he sits in that little white boat, so you might see him through the window. Okie doke, so as big as the palm of your hand with a swallow-like forked tail. I'm going to get them here in Norfolk, nowhere else in the country, because they're caterpillar, but only a plant called milk parsley that again only lives in our particular reed and sedge bed microclimates. They're a real sort of icon of the Broads. And then eventually come out to a little hide that looks out over a special nesting platform. And now we're also going to try and find some great crested grebes now, these are actually related to the penguin in that they have their feet right on the back of their body, making them excellent at diving under the water and catching fish. But they can never actually come to land because their feet are too far back on their body. So what they do is build little floating rafts that they lay their eggs on. And if we can keep them from being blown off the side here, you can see on the right there is a already, which was how deep are the Broads? So the answer is they're very shallow. So because they were only created by medieval diggings, they weren't dug especially deep in the first place, and then they were then silted up over the years. So they're going to be Salhouse Broad. That's when I've swum in there. It's about chest height, about 4 or 5 foot deep maximum. In the edges, about 2 foot deep. Often Great Broads, as I told you earlier, on the right was 1 or 2 foot deep. Worxham Broad's about 5 foot deep. So you could say everywhere is somewhere between 2 and 6 foot deep. And that's why most of these Broads boats, like this one, they're very shallow bottom, so they don't get stuck on the mud. So they'd be no good at sea. They're sort of shaped like a margarine tub underneath. Anyway, I hope that answers that.
Okay. Okay,
little lull in the squalls. I've just managed to get you onto the Broad. I'm just going to stick to this side, and at least you can see onto the Broad now if we stay out the wind in the lee of these trees.
Yeah.
Where?